The heat on the Mekong Delta was a living thing. It was a monster with wet, heavy breath. It pressed down on the soldiers day and night. The air was thick. You could almost chew it. It tasted of mud, diesel fuel, and something old and rotting. The sun was a cruel eye in the sky. It bleached the green jungle to a pale, sickly color. Sweat never dried. It ran in rivers down your back, under your helmet, and into your eyes. The camp was a messy collection of tents and sandbags. It sat on the edge of the wide, brown river. The river itself was a slow-moving snake, hiding secrets in its murky depths. Everything was damp. Your clothes, your letters from home, your very bones felt damp. Life at the river camp was a routine of noise and waiting. The constant hum of generators filled the air. Helicopters chopped the sky, their blades beating a rhythm of war. Men shouted orders, radios crackled with static and urgent voices. It was a symphony of chaos, yet underneath it all there was a strange, tense silence, the silence of the jungle. It watched the camp. It listened. The soldiers felt it. They felt the eyes of the enemy, and maybe something else, something older than the war itself. The mud was everywhere. It clung to their boots. It stained their uniforms. It was a constant reminder of where they were, a place that wanted to swallow them whole. The days bled into one another. They were marked only by the rising and setting of that merciless sun. A soldier's world shrank to the size of his rifle and the man next to him. They cleaned their weapons with religious care. They wrote letters they weren't sure would ever be read. They told jokes that weren't funny, just a way to push back the fear. The fear was as thick as the humidity. It was a ghost that walked among them. It whispered doubts in the dead of night. It made them jump at the snap of a twig or the cry of a strange bird. This was not just a battle against men, it was a battle against the place itself. The river was their lifeline and their enemy. It brought supplies on slow, vulnerable boats. It also brought the Viet Cong, silent as shadows in their small sampans. The water was the color of coffee with too much milk. It smelled of fish and decay. At night, the surface of the river would sometimes glow with a strange, faint light. The old-timers said it was phosphorus. The local villagers said it was the spirits of the drowned. The soldiers did not know what to believe. They only knew that the river held as many dangers as the jungle. It was a place of deep, dark water and even deeper secrets. And it was their home. Among the tired and anxious faces there was Private Jackson. He was a young man from the deep south of America. He was thin, with eyes that seemed to see things others did not. The other soldiers had a nickname for him. They called him Birdie. They called him this because Jackson was always whistling. It was not a happy, careless whistle. It was a strange, complicated tune. It was a melody that sounded like it came from another time, another place. It was a sad, haunting sound that drifted through the camp. It wound its way through the tents and over the sandbags. It was as much a part of the camp's soundscape as the helicopters. Most men had a nervous habit. Some chewed tobacco, some tapped their feet, some cleaned their rifles over and over. Jackson whistled. He whistled when he was on patrol, his soft tune a strange counterpoint to the jungle's noises. He whistled while he cleaned his M16, his fingers moving with a practiced grace. He whistled while he stared out at the dark, unmoving river. The tune was always the same. It was a complex and beautiful melody, full of sorrow and a strange kind of hope. It got under your skin. Some of the men found it comforting. It was a sign that Birdie was still there, still alive. For others, the tune was unsettling. It sounded too old, too full of secrets. Where did the tune come from? No one knew. If you asked Jackson, he would just smile a little. A sad, knowing smile. He would say, "It's just an old song from back home." But it did not sound like any song they had ever heard. It was not country. It was not rock and roll. It was something else entirely. It was the sound of a lonely road at midnight. It was the sound of a bargain made in the dark. The tune had a life of its own. It seemed to hang in the heavy air long after Jackson had stopped whistling. It was his signature, his ghost, his prayer. Jackson was a good soldier. He was quiet, he followed orders, and he was a crack shot. His skill with a rifle was uncanny. He could hit a target from a distance that seemed impossible. His movements in the jungle were fluid and silent like a cat. It was as if he was born for this terrible place. His talent was undeniable. It made him lucky. It made him valuable, but it also made him an outsider. His skill was so great it seemed unnatural. And always there was the whistling, that strange, endless tune. It separated him from the others, wrapping him in a cloak of mystery and a faint, unspoken dread. The memory would come to Jackson in waves. It came in the quiet moments before sleep. It came in the heat of a firefight. The humid air of the Mekong would suddenly smell of Louisiana dirt and honeysuckle. He was 18 again. He was standing at a dusty crossroads just outside his small town. The sun was setting. It painted the sky in streaks of orange and purple. A single, gnarled oak tree stood at the center of the crossroads. Its branches looked like twisted fingers reaching for the sky. This was a place of legend, a place where deals were made, a place where you could sell your soul for a song. His family was poor, not just a little poor, they were bone poor. His father worked his fingers to the bone on a small patch of land that barely grew enough to feed them. His mother was always sick, her face pale and worried. Jackson wanted more. He dreamed of being somebody. He dreamed of having a talent, something that would make him special. He had heard the stories the old bluesmen told them. They said if you came to this crossroads at sunset, if you had a wish in your heart, someone might be there to listen, someone who could grant that wish, for a price. That evening, as the last light of day faded, a man appeared. He was not there one moment, and then he was. He was leaning against the old oak tree. He was dressed in a simple, dark suit. His face was hard to see in the growing shadows, but Jackson could see his smile. It was a wide, friendly smile that did not reach his eyes. His eyes were dark and old. They seemed to hold all the secrets of the world. "You're a long way from home, son," the man said. His voice was smooth as silk, but with an edge of something sharp underneath. "What brings a boy like you to a place like this?" Jackson's heart was pounding. He could barely speak, but the words came out. He told the man about his family. He told him about his desire for a future, for a talent that would lift him out of the dirt. He wanted to be the best. He wanted to be lucky. He wanted to win. The man listened patiently. He nodded slowly. When Jackson was finished, the man smiled again. "A wish like that has a cost," he said softly. "Everything has a cost. Are you prepared to pay?" Jackson, young and desperate, did not hesitate. He did not ask the price. He just nodded. "Yes," he said. The man held out his hand. Jackson shook it. The man's grip was firm and cold. As they shook hands, a new tune filled Jackson's mind. A sad, beautiful melody. The price was set. The deal was made. Back in the humid reality of Vietnam, the crossroads felt a world away. But the deal was not forgotten. The jungle seemed to know about it. The camp on the delta was more than just a military outpost. It was a place where the veil between worlds felt thin. The local villagers had their own stories. They spoke of spirits that lived in the ancient trees. They spoke of demons that haunted the dark waters of the river. The soldiers laughed at these stories during the day, but at night, when the darkness was complete and the jungle came alive with strange sounds, the laughter died. The stories did not seem so funny then. The men of Jackson's platoon grew closer through shared hardship. They were a brotherhood forged in mud and fear. They shared cigarettes, pictures of their sweethearts, and their deepest anxieties. They watched each other's backs on patrol. They pulled each other out of the mud. There was a soldier named Miller, a big loud man from Chicago. There was a quiet medic named Chen, whose parents were from Taiwan. They were a mixed group of boys, all turned into men too quickly by the war. They relied on each other to survive. That bond was the only thing that made sense in this insane world. Yet, even among his brothers, Jackson remained apart. His luck was becoming a legend. Bullets seemed to bend around him. He would spot hidden traps that everyone else missed. On patrols, he would lead them away from ambushes, guided by a feeling, a hunch. At first, the men were grateful. "Good eyes, Birdie," they would say. But soon their gratitude was mixed with suspicion. His luck was too good, it was unnatural. And always there was the whistling. That tune seemed to follow him like a shadow. It was a constant reminder that Jackson was different. He carried a secret that the jungle seemed to understand. The atmosphere in the camp grew heavier. The war was taking its toll. But it was more than that. There was a feeling of being watched. A sense of a presence that was neither American nor Viet Cong. Sometimes at the edge of the camp's light, men would see things. A shadow that moved too fast. A pair of eyes that glowed in the dark. They would dismiss it as a trick of the light, as a symptom of their tired, stressed minds. But the feeling remained. A silent, creeping dread. The jungle was not neutral ground. It had its own power, its own ancient rules. And Jackson, with his devil's luck and his haunting tune, seemed to have a special connection to it. The visions began subtly. At first it was just a glimpse. A figure standing at the edge of the jungle, just beyond the reach of the camp's lights. The figure was tall and thin. He was dressed in the simple black pajamas worn by the local farmers and the Viet Cong. But there was something different about this man. He stood too still. He seemed to watch Jackson, and only Jackson. When Jackson would blink, the man would be gone. He told himself it was just stress. The heat and the fear were playing tricks on his mind. Everyone was seeing things. It was nothing. But the visions became clearer, more frequent. One sweltering afternoon, Jackson was on guard duty, staring out at the wall of green. The air was still. The world seemed to be holding its breath. Then, he saw him. The man in the black pajamas was standing not 20 yards away, clear as day. He was leaning against a banyan tree, its roots dangling around him like snakes. The man's face was in shadow, but Jackson could feel his gaze. It was a heavy, knowing look. He was smiling. It was the same smile from the crossroads in Louisiana. A wide, friendly smile that did not touch his eyes. Jackson's blood ran cold. The rifle in his hands felt impossibly heavy. He should have shouted. He should have raised the alarm. But he was frozen. He was paralyzed by a fear deeper than any he had felt in combat. This was not the enemy. This was something else. The man raised a hand, not in threat, but in a casual wave. It was a gesture that said, "I am here. I am watching. You have not forgotten our deal, have you?" The tune, the one Jackson always whistled, began to play in his head. It was louder and clearer than ever before. It was not coming from his own lips. It was coming from the man. Then, as quickly as he had appeared, the man faded. He did not run or walk away. He simply dissolved into the jungle, like smoke in the wind. Jackson was left standing there, his heart hammering against his ribs. The air rushed back into his lungs. The sounds of the camp returned, but everything had changed. The line between reality and memory, between the war in Vietnam and the bargain in Louisiana, had been erased. He was not just haunted by the war, he was being hunted by his past. The devil had come to the Delta, and he was here to check on his investment. The devil's visit was a promise. It was a reminder of the bargain. Jackson had asked for talent. He had asked for luck. He had asked to be a winner. And the man from the crossroads was showing him that a deal is a deal. Jackson's skills sharpened. His senses became almost supernatural. He could smell the enemy on the wind. He could hear the faint click of a rifle safety from 100 yards away. In the chaos of a firefight, time would seem to slow down for him. He moved with a calm, deadly grace. He never missed. He was no longer just a good soldier. He was a force of nature, a legend in his own platoon. His luck was a shield. Mortar shells would land just feet from his foxhole but leave him untouched. He would walk through booby-trapped fields as if he had a map of every wire and every mine. On one patrol, a sniper's bullet tore through the sleeve of his jacket, missing his arm by less than an inch. The man next to him was not so lucky. Jackson saw the gratitude in his surviving comrade's eyes, but he also saw the fear. They looked at him with a kind of awe, but also with a deep unease. It was not normal for one man to be so lucky. It was not right. He tried to stop whistling the tune. He tried to force it from his mind, but it was no use. The melody was a part of him now. If he tried to suppress it, it would just bubble up in his thoughts, a constant looping soundtrack to the war. Sometimes he would wake up in the middle of the night, the tune on his lips, a cold sweat on his brow. He was paying the price for his wish. He was becoming the best. He was a winner. But he was losing himself in the process. He was becoming a hollow shell, filled only with the devil's luck and the devil's song. The man in the black pajamas appeared more often. Jackson would see him on the far bank of the river, a dark shape against the setting sun. He would see his face reflected in a puddle of muddy water. He never spoke. He just watched and smiled. Each sighting was a confirmation. "See?" the smile said. "I am keeping my end of the bargain. You are becoming everything you wanted to be." Jackson was trapped. He was living out the consequences of his desperate wish. He was a hero to his platoon, a demon of luck on the battlefield. But he knew the truth. He was the devil's soldier, fighting in the devil's war. The attack came just after midnight. There was no moon. The darkness was absolute. It started with a single sharp whistle, not from Jackson, but from across the river. Then, the world exploded. Rockets and mortar shells rained down on the camp. The air filled with the sounds of explosions, screams, and automatic weapons fire. The Viet Cong were launching a major assault. They came out of the jungle and across the river in small boats, their dark figures illuminated by the flashes of gunfire. The camp, which had been a place of tense waiting, was now a vortex of pure chaos and fire. Jackson moved through the madness like a phantom. The deal was paying off in blood and fire. While others scrambled for cover, he seemed to know exactly where to be. He fired his rifle with a steady, methodical rhythm. Each shot found its mark. He moved from one defensive position to another, shoring up the line, directing fire and pulling wounded men to safety. Time slowed down for him again. The explosions were like silent flashes of light. The screams were distant echoes. All that mattered was the target in his sights and the cold, calm certainty in his heart. The luck was with him. The devil's luck. He saw them coming for the command tent. A small group of enemy soldiers had broken through the perimeter. They were moving quickly and silently toward the heart of the camp. If they succeeded, the entire defense would collapse. There was no one else to stop them. Without thinking, Jackson ran to intercept them. He fired from the hip, his movements fluid and precise. He was a whirlwind of controlled violence. He fought with a skill that was not his own. It was a borrowed talent, and the interest was coming due. He was not just fighting for his life, or the lives of his comrades, he was fulfilling his part of the bargain. He took down the last of the attackers just as they reached the tent. He stood there for a moment, breathing heavily, the smell of gunpowder thick in his nostrils. The battle was still raging around him, but in his small corner of it, there was a sudden silence. He had done it. He had saved the command post. He had been the hero. The price for his talent had been paid in the lives of others. He felt a wave of nausea. He had won, just as he had wished, but the victory tasted like ash in his mouth. The river itself seemed to be on fire, reflecting the orange glow of the burning camp. Just as the thought of victory crossed his mind, a new threat appeared. A single enemy soldier rose from the shadows behind him. Jackson had not seen him. He was exhausted, his supernatural senses dulled by the fight. The soldier raised his rifle. The muzzle was pointed directly at Jackson's back. There was no time to react. This was it. This was the moment his luck finally ran out. He closed his eyes, waiting for the impact, for the end. The deal, it seemed, did not include immortality. He had been a winner, but now the game was over. But the shot never came. Instead, a voice whispered in his ear. It was a smooth, silky voice. A voice he knew from a dusty crossroads half a world away. "Not yet, son," the voice said. "Our business is not finished." Jackson's eyes snapped open. He spun around. The enemy soldier was standing there, frozen. His finger was on the trigger, but he was not moving. His eyes were wide with a terror that had nothing to do with the battle. He was staring at something just behind Jackson, something that Jackson could not see. Then, the soldier simply collapsed. He did not fall as if he had been shot. He crumpled to the ground like a puppet with its strings cut. There was no wound on him. He was just gone. Jackson stood alone, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. The air around him grew cold, a stark contrast to the humid, fiery night. He felt a presence at his back, a chilling, powerful presence. He did not dare to turn around. He knew who it was, the man in the black pajamas, his silent partner, his protector. The presence lingered for a moment, a heavy weight on the air. Then it was gone. The coldness dissipated, the sounds of the battle rushed back in. Jackson was left alone, shaking, not from the fight, but from the intervention. He had not been saved by his own skill or his own luck. He had been saved by his patron. It was a terrifying realization. His life was no longer his own. It belonged to the man from the crossroads. He had been spared, not out of kindness, but because the devil's business was not yet finished. He was still a useful piece in a much larger game. Weeks after the night attack, the camp was a different place. The destroyed tents had been replaced. The dead had been buried or sent home. The rhythm of war had returned, but something had changed for Jackson. He was no longer just Bertie, the whistling soldier. He was a hero. The story of his actions during the attack had spread like wildfire. They said he had single-handedly saved the command post. They said he fought like a man possessed. They said he was the luckiest soldier in the entire United States Army. He was the man who could not be killed. A high-ranking general flew in from Saigon just for him. A ceremony was held in the middle of the camp. The men of his platoon stood in formation under the brutal sun. The general, a man with a chest full of medals and a stern face, stood before them. He spoke of bravery. He spoke of duty. He spoke of heroism. He called Jackson's name. Jackson walked forward, his boots sinking into the soft mud. The entire camp was watching him. He stood at attention, his eyes fixed straight ahead, his face a mask of stone. The general pinned a medal to Jackson's chest. It was a Silver Star, one of the nation's highest awards for valor. The medal was cool against his hot, sweat-soaked uniform. The general shook his hand firmly. "Son," the general said, his voice full of pride, "you have made your country proud." The men of his platoon cheered. They clapped him on the back. They shouted his name. It was a moment of triumph. It was everything a young man could dream of. It was a moment of public recognition, of honor, of glory. But for Jackson, the moment was completely hollow. The medal felt heavy like a stone pulling him down. The general's words were empty noise. The cheers of his comrades sounded distant and strange. He felt like an actor in a play. He was playing the part of a hero. But he knew the truth. He was not a hero. He was a fraud. The bravery was not his. The skill was not his. The luck was not his. It was all part of the deal. It was all a gift from the man at the crossroads. This medal did not belong to him. It belonged to the devil. That night, Jackson sat alone on his cot. The rest of the men were celebrating. They were drinking warm beer and telling exaggerated stories about the battle. The sound of their laughter drifted into his tent. He should have been with them. He should have been the center of the celebration. But he could not bring himself to join. He felt a deep, chilling sense of isolation. He was surrounded by his brothers in arms, but he had never felt more alone. He was a stranger among them, hiding a terrible secret. He took the Silver Star out of his pocket. He held it in the palm of his hand. The dim light of the single bulb in his tent caught the polished metal. It gleamed. For a moment he saw his own reflection in the metal's surface. He saw his tired young face. He saw the fear in his eyes. He looked like a scared boy, not a hero. He was just a kid from Louisiana who had made a terrible mistake. He had wished for a way out of his poor life, and he had gotten it. But the cost was higher than he could ever have imagined. As he stared at the medal, the reflection changed. For a split second, it was not his own face looking back at him. It was another face. A face with dark, ancient eyes and a wide, friendly smile that did not reach them. It was the face of the man from the crossroads. The man in the black pajamas. The face of his silent partner. The reflection was there for only an instant, but it was enough. It was a message, a reminder. This belongs to me. You belong to me. Jackson's hand trembled. He quickly closed his fist around the metal, hiding the reflection from sight. He could feel the presence in his tent, the same cold spot in the air that he had felt on the night of the attack. He was not alone. The devil had come to admire his work. Jackson did not look up. He kept his eyes fixed on the floor. He could hear the faint, haunting melody of the tune he always whistled. But it was not coming from his own head this time. It was being whistled softly, just outside his tent. A soft, chilling sound that cut through the noise of the celebration. The devil was out there, in the darkness, waiting. The war in Vietnam would eventually end for Jackson. He would finish his tour of duty. He would go home. But the war inside him would never be over. He would leave the Mekong Delta behind, but the Delta would never leave him. He would carry the heat, the mud, and the fear with him for the rest of his days. He would be welcomed home as a hero. His name would be in the local papers. They would tell the story of the brave young soldier with the Silver Star. They would see the medal, but they would not see the shadow that came with it. He would try to live a normal life. He would find a job. He might even start a family. But the haunting would continue. He would see the man from the crossroads in the faces of strangers on the street. He would hear the haunting tune whistled on the wind on a quiet night. He would wake up in a cold sweat, the smell of jungle rot and gunpowder in his nostrils. The deal was not finished. The devil had saved him for a reason. His debt was not fully paid. He was still a piece in a game he did not understand. The story of Jackson, the whistling soldier they called Birdie, serves as a dark parable. It is a tale about the desperation of war and the high price of ambition. It blurs the line between the horrors of combat and the chilling whispers of folklore. Was the man in the black pajamas real? Or was he a creation of Jackson's stressed and terrified mind? Was it the devil's luck that saved him, or just the random chaos of war? In the end, the answer does not matter. The haunting was real for Jackson. The debt was real for him. And so, the tale ends. But the story does not. It leaves us with a lingering, profound unease. It reminds us that some deals cannot be undone. Some debts can never be fully repaid. Jackson, the hero, would forever be looking over his shoulder. He would be waiting for his silent partner to return. He would be waiting for the day when the devil would come to collect the final payment. Because the devil's business is never truly finished. There is always one last price to pay. And Jackson knew, with a cold certainty in his soul, that one day he would be asked to pay it.